good evening, and welcome to KTJO, Ottawa The Rage, 88.9 FM. This is It Matters, the most important show on the radio right now. On tonight's show, we'll be talking about the yearly spectacle that is the Academy Awards. Are the Oscars more than a ceremony of self-congratulation? Do the awards mean anything more than a large payday for the winner? Do they really matter to us today? Stay tuned as we try to answer these questions and find out what matters today in our world. Welcome to It Matters. I'm your host, Jeremy Riggs. Well, here we come, March 2nd, just a few days away, and that's the date for this year's Academy Awards ceremony. This is the 86th Academy Awards, and this ceremony is big time for Hollywood. It cost a fortune to produce, and it's pretty safe to say that almost everybody in the industry would like to win one at one time or another. But what do they really mean to us? What really are these Academy Awards? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. With me to go over the Oscars today, I have Ryan Lewis. Ryan is an assistant professor in communications at Ottawa University. He was a film production major in college. He worked for years in post-production at MTV, VH1, and Nickelodeon. He was a post-production intern on the Academy Award-winning documentary Born into Brothels back in 2004. Ryan, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's just start off, because a lot of people don't know exactly what are the Oscars.
Well, I think it depends on who you ask. To me, they're just like the greatest celebration or holiday that the movie industry has. And so pomp and circumstance and a little bit of graduation, a little bit of Christmas presents, all wrapped into a nice sort of $40 million budget, or however much it is. And so really technically it is a way for the industry to reward itself for a job well done. And for us, or the billion people who have access to watching it around the world, it means a lot of different things, socially, economically, politically, any number of things really.
Sure. You say it's a recognition for the industry itself. What is the process that the film goes through when it's getting selected for an Oscar?
Well, I think in the contemporary sense, it's a lot more about advertising and public relations. The awarding process has always been infiltrated a bit by hungry producers who want that award, because there's traditionally a payment bump after the Oscars, or after a nomination occurs, then a movie is going to get a certain percentage increase in how much it makes, either at the box office or in sales. And so everybody wants it, not just for the notoriety of which we've come to expect that comes from the Academy Awards, but also this great economic benefit. And so the award itself, the nominations, are put forth by different committees on the Academy that only certain people are privileged to vote on. So, for example, the Best Score category is only nominated by people who are in that section of the industry, whereas Best Actor is then nominated by the entire Academy itself. So the awards come from a mixture of internal groups and lobbying and persuasion, and then a bunch of external effects. So Variety, the industry newspaper, basically will put up these ads leading up to the Oscar nominations in order to say, for your consideration.
So just to clarify, all the categories are voted upon by the members of the Academy that participate in that group. So cinematographer votes for cinematography, except for Best Picture, where everyone gets a vote.
Everyone votes Best Picture, and Best Director, and the acting categories.
Okay.
So within the Academy itself, there's all these different subsidiaries. So the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, and then the subfield of visual effects designers.
I see.
And so those people are the ones then who are responsible for nominating. So before the Academy Awards come out, there's usually a short list that's provided for all the technical categories. So if you're ever really obsessed about it, which of course I am, you can find out for example, they weed down all of the amazing special effects that come to us from our blockbusters over the summer. Usually by the end of November, they've shortened that down. The visual arts people have shortened that down to a list of about 15 or 16. And so then they shorten it again in December, and then the 3 to 5 nominees that come out every year.
I hear there's mixed controversy about the voting process because all the categories, basically, except for Best Picture, you pick one. Best
Right.
Picture, you have to rank them because they have what's called a preferential
Now.
ranking system right now, which means that just because the 30% of people voted for Best Picture and it was the number one slot for 30%, and that was the highest number one ranking, number three still could win because it's lower on the list, but yet not cut out from other people. I mean, it's a really hard thing to
Yeah.
explain.
Well, that ranking system is relatively new, and the Academy they were trying to say it in a nice way, that the reason that they wanted to expand the offerings from 5 to up to 10 nominees is because people's favorite movies weren't getting nominated, and so they were taking a ratings hit. Even though, I mean, 1 billion people is still a lot to me, but of course, to people who live and die by this stuff, that's like, oh, okay, well, we're taking a hit on this, so let's add some more movies into it. And then this rating system is so interesting because then you have the fringes of the Academy who want specific films, and then they lobby so hard for it. So, for example, a couple years ago in Tree of Life, a movie that nobody had heard of hardly unless you were like really in the scene, and Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. They both had very small but very vocal lines of support, and both of them ended up getting a Best Picture nomination because all of these people put it as their number one.
Interesting.
I think that year they had 8 nominees, which is so difficult when you're trying to watch all the nominees before it comes out. You're like,
Right.
36. Or there were 52 nominated this year, including the shorts. And there are people, I mean, I was reading this blog the other day about there's just these people who just live and die by making sure they watch all of them.
Well, I think it's interesting that a lot of the members of the Academy aren't required to watch. The only categories, according to the ballot, that they're required to watch all of are documentary, short film, and I think short animated film. Everything else they
And
don't
foreign.
have. And foreign film, right.
Yeah.
Everything else they don't have, they can still vote on, but they don't have to see. I mean,
Well, they set up special screenings, so you can't actually vote unless you attend the special screening, which is helpful for the live action. Although I always find that problematic because there's always situations, for example, if it's raining outside, you're in a psychological state where you're looking for something happier, so you go into the theater and then the happiest one ends up winning. Or, you know, like there's all these different, I mean, of course, it's not an exact science, it's a freaking award show, but it is at the same time something that is not really taken into consideration. So, you know, these documentaries, depending on how they're ordered even, could evoke a real certain set of emotions that you wouldn't get in a different way.
sure. Wait, so are you implying that psychology has something to do with filmmaking?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. Well, not just watching it. Of course, it's like people. And when you're at the top of the industry and you're getting paid millions of dollars to participate in this industry as whatever producer and editor, there's a certain level of hubris, ego involved there, and so I think people take that into the nominations as well. And of course, there's so much cronyism in the Hollywood as well. It's like
Right.
people's friends I mean, as you know, the big controversy of the year with that song being nominated because that dude just sent around a bunch of emails that.
Right. So what Ryan's referring to is there was a song that was nominated for the category of Best Original Song, and it was for some independent, religious, obscure Christian type film. The producer, I believe it was, of the film had some in Hollywood and sent out, to my understanding, personal emails saying, "Hey, vote for this film, or at least come see this film." And the Academy ended up frowning on that and disqualified the film from their nomination.
It took them a while though. They put out these press releases about why it was still on the up and up because the movie didn't have any money. So how was it supposed to advertise for the song budget? So this guy took it upon himself to personally email. But of course,
Right.
that's against the rules of the Academy. You can't personally lobby someone
Right.
for a nomination.
Which I understand, but yet I think I still see his point. When a Sony has an unlimited advertising budget to put in a full double page ad in the Hollywood Reporter, that's 4-color glossy, hey, vote for my film, but yet independent filmmaker Joe Smith, he spent his credit card budget, $20,000 and made this film, which barely eked by in the minimum requirements to be nominated, and yet gets nominated. He has nothing left for advertising. So, what does an independent film person do in that situation?
Well, the Academy likes to claim independent credit all the time, there are all these movies that get nominated at the Independent Spirit Awards, for example, that are backed by the Weinstein brothers. So it's not exact. I mean, the
Right.
world of independent is completely shaken because now it's somewhat popular. There's a market for quote
Sure.
unquote independent work. In 2002, I think it was, there was this big coup when In the Bedroom was nominated for one of the top 5 because it was a movie that made, I mean, it didn't have any money, it didn't make much money, but it did have some powerful people backing it. And there's the Academy after that went out of its way to promote its independent credit. So somehow, like, it's always been trying to promote its credibility through the fact that it includes people. And I think part of their expansion to 9 or to
Sure.
10 also is an attempt to do this. So when it likes to say that it is accessible for independent films, but of course, there isn't. It's all about distribution. When Sundance first started years ago, and it was really supposed to be this new mechanism for distributing independent film, or at least seeing it. Suddenly, that was great until, of course, major distributors got into it, and so then Sundance became a prerequisite for a lot of
Right.
promotion for independent. So I mean, this is a long way of answering
Right.
your question, just to say that, I mean, I don't think that there is much of an independent market in the Academy, but they like to think that there is.
To me, I think a good analogy would be the Olympics. The Olympics used to be amateur athletes, winning the awards and then moving on. And I think independent film used to be those amateur filmmakers who had really good stories to tell that a studio wouldn't allow them to tell. And now it's more, hey, I'm Robert Redford, and not to say anything bad about Robert Redford,
You can say bad things about
but he or someone of his ilk they're making a movie because they want to, and sure, it's independent because it's independent of a studio, but
Sure, it's
he's still
outside the
spending
studio
$15
system.
million on it.
Well, and even the shorts, the short documentaries and the live and animated short categories used to be fairly independent because who's watching 6-minute animation films?
Right.
And experimental films. And now it is so promulgated by people, like rich and famous people are now directing all of these. And HBO, who I will never say anything bad about HBO, have actually taken it upon themselves to promote a lot of these new independent short filmmakers.
Yeah.
And so even those categories, which formerly were reserved for all of these independent, are now becoming much more mainstream. So it's
Right.
very interesting to see that happen as well.
Huh. Interesting. So, who really decides? I mean, do these people? I mean, is there the members of the Academy? I mean, it's not a published list. I think the heads of each group are published. Like, that's what 2012. I think Kathy Bates was head of the actors and whatnot. How much do these people actually have power over, or is there some sort of hierarchical decision making going on, saying, well, or does everyone have an equal vote?
I think there's internal and external pressure that goes into that. So internal, that there is a once a film becomes acknowledged, then there's often this bandwagon approach to it. And so people who have key voices in that fight tend to have more soft power. I mean, it is somewhat democratic. I mean, as much as it can be, in that everyone one vote, one person kind of concept. But it does people bend to pressure all the time. So there, if there's a film that is politically viable but not necessarily great, or is made by certain people that there was an interesting couple years ago when the movie The Reader was nominated for Best Picture. There was a lot of kerfuffle about it because a lot of people thought it was very stoic. It was very, I loved the film, but it was very epic in that traditional sense. So what is this film doing that's different, that should be recognized? But then both of the directors and the producers had died that year. And so there was this, everybody gets into the conspiracy theories, but there is this sort of desire to commemorate and in a very real way. And actor nominations occur look at Heath Ledger a few years ago with The Dark Knight, that was, what is his winning mean? And to the Academy that year, it meant recognition for
Sure.
a lot more than just, you did a great job in this movie kind of thing.
Right.
So who has power? Internal, lobbying, external, again, a lot of money goes into this, so people are persuaded by a lot of different means.
How much of the decisions, and I mean, of course, this is speculation, but how much of the decisions that are made, how many of them are made for political purposes? For example, well, he probably should have won 2 years ago, but so we're going to make it up to him and give it to him this year. Or, what, the Academy this year, we're going to focus on gay and lesbian issues. So let's highlight an LGBT film.
Sure,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that the best current of that can be seen in the best documentary category. Is that there's so many documentaries that have won that when you look back at them, you think, what is this? Like, it was very much a product of the moment, and the one I think about that fits that really well, other than like these 1940s pro-war documentaries, or in 1990, this film called The Panama Deception won, and it's highly propagandistic, but it was like at the height of then President Bush 41, whose endeavors in Panama and around Latin America were like coming under fire. And then, I mean, you look at Michael Moore and Bowling for Columbine, or, every year there's a lot of documentaries or products of political engagement. I mean, if you're talking about actors and you're talking about they won for something else, that happens. I mean, I think the best example of that is Judi Dench winning for Shakespeare in Love when she was on screen for a total of 8 minutes, when she lost the year before for Her Majesty Judi Dench, Her Majesty Judi Dench, of course she is, Her Majesty Mrs. Brown, which was a spectacular film, and a lot of people thought she was robbed. So the next year when she was nominated again, she ends up holding a statuette for something that I don't know, she looked good in those giant costumes, but come on, give me a break. Yeah, and that happens all the time. I mean, Cate Blanchett didn't win for Elizabeth, so she won for The Aviator, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it happens all the time, I think. So there's lots of politics, and I think people are really excited about giving people their due. Melissa Leo lost for Frozen River, and then she won for The Fighter and stuff like that. I mean, people make their argument that they're based in that individual performance, but career awards are given all the time for people.
Right. So in doing the research for this show, I came across the statistics for who makes up the Academy of the voters, and I think it's interesting. It might point to some of the decision making that's made. So, ethnically speaking, of the Academy, 94% of the voters are white, and of only 2% is black and 2% Latino. So then the other are made up by various ethnicities. Age, the median age was 62, which means over half of the Academy is over 62, and 14% is younger than 50, which, as of the time when this was done, this study was 2012. That meant only 807 members of the almost 5,800 of Academy were younger than 50. 77% were male. So how does this influence the voting process?
Well, I think that's a reflection of the industry, too. People in power, and it's been this way always. It's never been able to crack that, no matter, because people often think of Hollywood as this super liberal bastion, and although politically it might vote that way, it is certainly not the pluralistic, diverse society that we want it to be. And so there's always these charges against it. And I think that that's a very valid way of understanding it, is that when you have a body that's 94% white, how do we represent black stories, for example, in Hollywood, is very much usually outside the Hollywood system. So the Tyler Perrys of the world operate outside of that system. So that doesn't even, count. And I'm not actually sure if Tyler Perry has a vote. That would be very interesting. Certainly he has a SAG card, so he votes in the Screen Actors Guild Awards, things like that. But, I think the creation of the Hollywood Foreign Press and the whole gallantry around the Golden Globe Awards try to show this as well, that there's these foreign emissaries who also have opinions about film. So, and I don't know how diverse they are either. There's only like 50 of them, so how that breaks down. But sometimes they try to sell themselves better because they are more diverse. But of course, if diverse means you speak Dutch, then I don't know how diverse that is. But then when you have this age thing too, I mean, I think this is fascinating because it shows kind of the films that people become really fascinated with. So a couple years ago, The Social Network was so popular amongst people over the age of 40. Like, it was, I mean, all of the reviews that I read and all of the speculation about the Academy, everybody that you'd asked over a certain age was like, this is revolutionary, this is the greatest film ever because it highlights this generation and the shift, and people under that age were like, duh, yeah, this, okay,
Right.
great. This is a great biography. We love this biopic. Great actors, great charged screenplay, yada, yada. But what is it that people see in it? I mean, I thought it was a great film, but again, that's, I think, part of the reason that crashed and burned before the Academy Awards was because I think people were starting to realize the age presence in it. Or several years ago when Crash won in a last minute over Brokeback Mountain, there were charges that it was a generational divide, that kind of stuff. People were uncomfortable with certain pictures versus others. So, I mean, that's all speculation, of course,
Sure.
but what all of these facts, I mean, look at how two people are framing the Academy Awards this year with 12 Years a Slave. People are excited because it's the first time potentially a black person is going to win the Best Director award,
Right.
which has never happened before, which I think is indicative of something else.
It's only but the second nomination, right? Because
Because for Precious
Right.
several years ago, but it's not going to happen because Alfonso Cuarón is going to win for Gravity. But that's also in itself the first Latino.
Sure.
I mean, he's from Mexico, so certainly the first Chicano man to win an Academy Award for Best Director.
Right.
I mean, the diversity speaks to it. I mean, in 2001, when both Halle Berry and Denzel won, that there were a lot of speeches that year about breaking that glass ceiling because no black person had won the best category. Certainly lots
Sure.
of Best Supporting Actors and Actresses awards, but never the Best Actor, Actress. And since that's been followed up a couple times in
Yeah.
the last 10 years. So yeah, I mean, it is a diversity problem, and I mean, it goes to all different aspects.
How much would you, in your opinion, do you think that the Academy, the way they focus on the films they choose and the roles that they choose to award, how much do you think that plays into what films get made and what actors get cast? I mean,
Oh,
do the
that's a good
studios
question.
choose
Yeah.
to make movies because they know they're going to increase their chances for an award?
Studios make films because they make money for them, so most of the films that get highlighted follow a very traditional pattern of screenplay, of actors, and tried and tested in test groups and years. There is this subset, a lot of the independent, quote, independent films that get nominated are usually produced by subsidiaries. So Warner Brothers has Warner Independent,
Right.
and Sony Classic, those kinds of pictures that have a smaller budget and a completely different office, so they don't have to use those or think of those in terms of their overall budget. And of course, we slam them all into the last 3 months of the year. So in terms of monetary purpose, the Academy Awards are this, I think of it as this way of the film industry recognizing itself for doing greatness in 3 months, when for the previous 9 months it had just been giving us a whole bunch of crap.
Right, and I mean, you say the film industry's business is to make money. Well, sure, I mean, it is a business after all.
Sure.
And I think it's really interesting that the majority of the films from Hollywood don't make any money in the United States. At least the majority
of its money?
The majority of its money is made overseas, and it's made on movies like Transformers, which is
Sure.
an amazingly terrible movie,
Which played really well in China.
which played really well in China because.
Well,
who
you have
knows?
if you have a billion people as a potential audience, you sort of have to make these ubiquitous
Right.
films and these storylines, and absolutely. So if Ray Fiennes did a film this year about Charles Dickens that
Mhm.
played in here and in the UK, but it barely played here. So, like those kinds of films do not get a lot of move backing
Right.
because you can't sell that in China. So, a lot of the films that are nominated for Best Picture could play easily around the world in India. And so that helps them get made.
I mean, and this is a little bit divergent from what we're talking about with Oscars, but playing to the film industry itself. I mean, there's a huge movement out there saying because these huge blockbusters, we were spending $250, $300 million on one picture that might make it up on overseas sales, but yet you have these great lower budget, $30 million films that make 60.
Isn't that
they're
amazing that we
doubling
call
their
those
money.
lower budget too right now, 30 million? It used to be, the Blair Witch Project was made for $300,000
Right.
and made $150 million at the box office, turnarounds like that. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
No.
Yeah, it's a strange system that we have all of this money. Do you remember the mid-90s with that terrible / amazing Kevin Costner film called Waterworld?
I do.
That was at the time the most expensive film ever made, and it was $200 million. And
Is it sad that I love that movie?
No, I did too. I
Dennis
usually
Hopper, oh
don't
my
tell
gosh.
people, certainly in a public setting, that I like that movie, but it was, in less than 15 years, that is almost laughed at. The
Right.
amount of money Titanic was made for $220 million or thereabouts, and yet we're easily topping that with
Right.
films these days. It's just incredible how expensive and so because they're getting so much bigger and so much more of a spectacle, we rely on those new markets.
Is that a good thing? The spectacle? I mean,
Well, it's always been, I think to say no would mean to say that all of film history is,
That's true.
even in the 1930s, like what was a spectacle? The big musicals or we like to see romances played out
Sure.
in a very voyeuristic way. We
That's
watch
true.
people make out on screen because it fulfills some, vicarious need through us. And so film has always been exploitive of our most entrenched desires, I think. And so do I think that it's bad today? I don't. I think that there's more money in the pot. I think that I just think that where that money gets channeled is bad. And I also think that socially we construct a world of fantasy that does not reflect society. And I think that's problematic.
Don't we as a culture, though, own these films? Sure, the studios own them, but from a larger Western civilization view, these are views into our culture. Shouldn't we have some say in what they say about us?
Well, I always try to tell people, I say the box office is the best form of how capitalism plays into democracy, and that if you think that a film is going to do something bad, don't go see it. Don't spend $13 on it. And I took a stand this year on not seeing The Wolf of Wall Street, and I have to take, people tell me, well, you haven't seen it, so you don't know. And I say, well, if I see it, then I'm contributing to something that I think might be negative.
Right.
There's a lot of blockbusters, and even if I perceive a hypersexualization of women, for example, that really gets under my skin, and I'm not going to sit in a theater for 2 hours to be mortified.
Right. I'm with you there. And we're going to get into that in the second half of the show. We're having an interesting conversation going this first half. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come right back. And we're going to be talking more about those gender issues and maybe some race issues, and getting into perhaps some sexual orientation issues as they pertain to the Oscars.
Ooh.
So stay tuned, and we'll be right back in just 2 minutes.
Hey, parents of children with asthma, here's another hit from the Breathe Easies.
Don't smoke in the house. Don't smoke in the house. Don't smoke around the kids in the house. Don't smoke in the car. Don't smoke in the house. Don't break my heart with your secondhand smoke in this kids and contribute the asthma.
Preventing asthma attacks can be as simple as making your home and car smoke-free zones. For more Breathe Easy tips to help stop asthma attacks, go to noattacks.org, brought to you by the EPA and the Ad Council.
Today, you brushed your teeth. You skipped the floss. You combed your hair. You took the train. You did the crossword. You missed 22 across. You went to work. You had a meeting. You ate your lunch. You had another meeting. You wondered, how is anyone supposed to get any work done around here with so many meetings? You left the office. You took the train. You ate your dinner. You brushed your teeth. You did all the things that one normally does the day before a brutal EF5 tornado rips through town, leaving 30,000 people without power. You never know when the day before is the day before. Prepare for tomorrow at ready.gov/today. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
All right, welcome back to It Matters. We're here in the studio with Ryan Lewis. We're talking about the Oscars today. Let's talk a little bit about inequality. Since 1946, the makeup of the United States has pretty much been equal. 50% men, 50% women, for the most part. Yet in movies today, according to a research done by the Annenberg Center, ran by Dr. Stacy Smith, they found out that only 17% of, like take a crowd scene or just extras, so only 17% are women in those. In speaking roles in family films rated G, PG, and PG-13, one out of 4 are women, and that's speaking roles. What does this say? I mean, how?
Well, people like to tell stories that encompass their own experience. So when you have the overwhelming majority of people in positions of power being men, then what stories do you find connection with? And they're very different. I mean, culturally, socially, we construct our gender identities in often very specific ways. And so certain stories, if you're an executive and you hear pitch and it's quote unquote a female story, then you might not see as much potential, certainly because there's also a feeling that men are more likely going to be spending more money to go to theaters than women. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. Maybe it is. But it certainly plays into what stories get produced and who gets to make those stories.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, the figures are it's pretty much even. It's 49% women, 51% men that are buying tickets for. So I mean, that's a huge disparity from what they think to what's actually happening. And I mean, is this possible? Could have an influence in the future, or is this something that as a society we're never going to get past? I mean, this is a very philosophical question.
Well, I think people have been talking about. I mean, in the last 20 years, especially the Oscars, there's been a movement or a conversation about, is this okay? And we have that conversation in the film industry once a year, every year, and so we like to make mention of it. But then, of course, what happens as a result of it? Not a whole lot.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking back at the history, and it looks like in the history of the Oscars, only 4 women have ever been nominated for Best Director, and of those, only 1 has ever won.
I'm almost surprised every year that there isn't someone who gets in that nomination category. And last year, for example, people thought Catherine Bigelow would get nominated again.
Right.
For Zero Dark 30. And so, every time it happens, suddenly there's this big, well, look at us. We're a little bit more diverse now. Percentages are increasing, but.
Well, it's sad because at the last year's Sundance, they writers made a big deal saying, 5 more women directed films this year. I mean.
It's interesting too because people are still holding that up as a benchmark, but those independent producers, again, work outside of Hollywood, so there is still no repositioning of power within traditional. We use the word Hollywood too to describe some monolithic film industry.
Sure.
It's hard to describe the boundaries of it, but I will say that if we think about the major studios, the ones making however many, $50 billion a year, whatever
Right.
that number is that, that is still overwhelmingly run by men.
Sure. And I mean, it looks like for directing, for producing, I mean, it all goes that way. I'm looking again at the history. 7 females have won for producing.
Lots have been nominated, though.
Lots have been nominated. That's true. Lots
For
have been
sure.
nominated.
But not that, producing is a little bit. But, of course, that doesn't belie the fact that this statistic
Sure.
exists.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the earliest of the winners was 1989. I mean,
Driving Miss
Daisy. That's right. So, I mean, I think it maybe shows that we are somehow working in the right direction. Because before that 89, there had to be women producing. I think Kathleen Kennedy was still producing before 89. I'm guessing. I don't know for sure, but there's big names like that have been in the industry for decades, but yet have never received a nomination. I mean,
or the Academy Award itself. And I think that that's an abysmal track record, but it also, I think seeing that it's changing a little bit, like seeing since 1989, you see these little pushes for change.
Well, and one of the changes that I've read about is that there's actually a push to segregate some of the Oscar categories. There's the push for making Best Female Director and Best Male Director to give those women who really don't, at least the industry feels they don't stand a chance because of the quote-unquote boys club that it is, to get a chance. Does that cheapen the award?
Well, I'm just speculating here, but I don't think that'll ever happen. The reason I think that won't ever happen is because the Academy Awards there is already this perception that it's too long, and so the inclusion of more awards means less advertising time, less ability to retain people to the end of the show, and that's when the director awards come out. So I don't see that happening.
Right.
I have heard an interesting argument about combining categories, but then of course you lose if you had actors and actresses, there's still this perception that an actor's performance in a dramatic role will always trump a female's performance, because very often, like psychologically deeply rooted, is that this belief that it's more credible, it's more forceful, and so we will always err on that side. And so, those arguments, of course, we would just be.
Does that play into the staggering, like the order of ceremonies? I mean, that's why, because the actress, if Best Actress seems to happen at like the halfway point, and the Best Actor happens towards the end, right before.
They change it up.
Oh, do they?
They do, and they always start with both supporting award categories too. Although I think they changed that last year. It really is. It's based often on retention, and so now there's this formula for. If we put this big old award in the beginning in this particular way, and then we can tease people to come back for it, then we can get all like the costumes and makeup and those kinds of awards done all in between. So you have to stagger them in order to keep people coming back.
One of my favorite parts of the Oscars every year is when they say, these are the ones we don't have time to televise, so let's just show you the winners.
Oh, the scientific and technical awards?
Right.
Yeah, and they always have some bombshell, always white,
right.
Usually. Well, 99 times out of or what is it? What are we, 86? So 86th Academy Award. So 85 out of 86 times it's been. A white woman who gives out these awards to all of these old men who have done amazing things in terms of film technology and sound effects and things like that. But we don't show them. Right. It's just, no one's, if you are interested in those, they do, I think they don't live cast them, but they certainly do they do live tweeting, I think, things like that. So
some of the arguments for doing the segregated, they said that if more women are nominated and win, they'll get more work and more money, and that will benefit more revenue for the studios as well. It'll get more audiences to see those films because, like you said, people see the nominations. Oh, I've got to go see this film. Why is it nominated? So it's an immediate audience draw right there. A lot of films even get re-released. If they were released in March, they'll get re-released in October or November.
Gravity,
exactly. Or even the next year, depending on how it goes. Again, the statistic they quote is, and this is from Variety. It says, women purchase half of the movie tickets sold in America. Who's better equipped to write, direct, and produce movies that will appeal to that demographic? Michael Bay? No. Hollywood may not be gender blind, but it's never been blind to dollar signs. When women are nominated, everyone wins. What do you think about that statement? Like, obviously, it's biased.
I think that people will conflate that with the larger political argument about affirmative action and whether or not that will happen. But when you have an organization that is an entire field of men, I don't see people releasing that stranglehold on it. That power is corrupting influence, I think. So I don't see it happening. Although that perhaps, I don't know how far down you'd have to go, like in terms of all of the films that were nominated this year for Best Picture. None of them were directed by a woman.
No.
So, how far, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but how far down the line do you have to go to find a female director?
Sure.
Now, there are a lot of independent award shows that do give out awards.
The average is 9%. 9% of films, at least from 2007 to 2012, the top 500, 9% were female.
When was that year?
2007 to 2012.
That's great. That's huge. It used to just be 2%.
So yeah, they said. Well, I would assume the statistic says 91% were male, so I would assume the other are either female or non.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Non-gender specific. I mean, as Facebook has now given us those options.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, yeah. I mean, but there's so much trouble there too with, gender identity that I don't think anybody in Hollywood is willing to go that extra far.
Then
that
you know
step.
what? That's a great point, and I think this applies to both women and LGBT issues. Look how, in the majority of films, how those characters are portrayed. I mean, I struggle to think of a movie other than, we mentioned Milk earlier, but where a homosexual male character is portrayed as anything other than a goofy sidekick or the comic relief or the guy that the main character doesn't want to be associated with because they don't want to think he's gay,
or the butch lesbian, or like these tropes that we
exactly. I mean, it becomes very much stereotypical,
And the only way to get around it is to have like the Philadelphia syndrome, where you have this character who is straight for all metaphoric value. This person seems straight, so we can portray them as gay. Or we have straight characters playing them. Or, look at in the transgendered world, the 2 Academy Award nominations for roles that are considered transgendered. So Felicity Huffman for Transamerica back in 2004, and then this year Jared Leto for Dallas Buyers Club.
Right.
Are both, there have been all these, these questions about, well, why haven't we found a transgendered actor to play this transgendered role? I mean, if you're looking for authenticity in character and role, then who better understands the world that this person lives in than these?
Although I can see it as an actor myself. On the flip side, as an actor, you're supposed to be able to portray anything and to be able to make that believable or whatnot.
That's the question over, are you a reflective industry? Do you want to reflect society, or are you creating fantasy? So again,
that's true. Well, if we go on traditional, both Shakespeare and Aristotle talked about holding the mirror up to nature. That's what acting is supposed to be.
That was always the benchmark for science too, is that science didn't, unless we were holding up a mirror to nature.
Yeah.
So everything has been, but in a contemporary age where you don't have to do that. Especially if, Felicity Huffman, that was the year after Desperate Housewives started. So she was riding this wave of critical appeal. And so again, I think that goes back to Hollywood in that you want to be able to have a star system. Celebrities sell tickets, especially for independent films, because then the actor gets cred for doing something that's, quote, brave. Or something that is independent, so they don't get paid very much to do it.
I'm thinking Lost in Translation.
Bill Murray.
That really kind of opened up his career to a second level. Because he's done other stuff since then. Before then, it was just kind of Bill Murray. Right.
Yeah, and now he's a little bit of both, or he's trying to be. And I think a lot of actors, look at Matthew McConaughey. How is that not? The same thing is that you spend years and years turning around your career by suddenly taking on these, quote, brave roles. And what are those brave roles? Well, now he's no longer
like Sahara
losing a guy in 10 days. Yeah, or now he's playing these hard-lined, emotionally distraught characters.
Like
Mud. And even Magic Mike to an extent, or this show that he's got on HBO. Yeah, it's just he's going to win this year, and I don't know if I can live in a world where there's an Academy Award winner, Matthew McConaughey. I don't know what's happening.
Keanu Reeves will be next year.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Let's hope.
So, according to the media advocacy group GLAAD, in 2012, less than 15% of films contained an LGBT character, and in those 15, virtually all were minor roles, minor parts. In the majority of these, like I said, these characters were the plucky sidekick, comic relief. The downside, as I see it, they were all specifically defined by their sexual orientation. Other than that, they had no purpose for being in the film. There was no reason for them to be there. They were there just because they're gay.
Well, I think this is indicative of the cycle that Hollywood goes through, is that there's always a marginalized class. And so when we put them in films, they are treated as large. Again, you're trying to sell tickets to the majority of people, so you bend your will to whatever common sense is at the time. And so up until the 1960s too, with black characters, look at Gone with the Wind, or any of these
Right.
films where reputable black actors then are taking on these roles that are certainly a marginalized perspective, or full of these negative tropes and stereotypes and things like that. But there's always also been these alternative film industries that have worked to create voice, and both, African American film up until the present day, gay films have afforded a lot of main character roles, and then slowly over time you see those sort of shifting into the mainstream. So I think Milk and Brokeback Mountain were turning points in portrayals, because then people were talking about, up until those points, we weren't talking about, well, all of these characters are sidekicks and all of that kind of thing.
Sure.
And until 2001, people weren't saying, well, why aren't there any great roles for black women that aren't housekeepers or, historical slaves? So, we start having these conversations once people realize. So once people do studies like this, then you start to see little shifts, I think.
So it's stepping stones. They don't realize it's really an issue until someone points it out. They're like, oh, and then they make steps to adjust it piece by piece. It's not something they can just wholeheartedly jump into.
You have these little movement. You have these big movements in the country and in the world, and then you have these little movements pushing it forward. So you have a couple high-profile films that do a lot for a group, and here we're talking about LGBTQ, but you could talk about anybody, like in terms of poor people. People who are below the poverty level. And how often are people depicted in a particular way in
Right.
film? Certainly, if you look at the fantasy aspect of film again, we're really obsessed with money and things that go boom. So we want everybody to be designer, and we want everybody. So all of that money speaks volumes. And so I think once people realize, well, how many characters depicted in major films are homeless? When was the last time you saw a film featuring a homeless person as the center? When was the last time
Wow.
a person portraying a homeless person was nominated for an Academy Award? I have no idea.
Wow.
It's just, the more you think about outside of that mainstream box, it's.
You're right. I'm going back, so I can think, way back in the early days of film, The Bicycle Thief, the guy was near homeless.
Yeah, or The Awful Truth. Did you ever see?
No, I didn't see that.
It's a Howard Hawks film. No, Preston Sturges.
Okay.
Excuse me. And it's hysterical, but it also, and of course there are many films that treat. A couple years ago, it was all anybody could stop talking about, the blind side. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that.
Sure.
But look, here's this affluent white woman who is creating a situation to help a impoverished.
But
black
then doesn't
person.
that fly into the whole thing that we've been trying to avoid since the 80s, of the idea of the Great White Hope?
Yes, that's why I didn't see The Blind Side. But people tell me it's brilliant. So again, I can't judge it. But again, I see it. There was a whole string of movies, Amazing Grace, these movies that featured white actors in an age of slavery that were helping to solve the problems of black people. I think this came up a couple years ago, when Lincoln was nominated,
Sure.
that there's this big counter argument to the film that says, well, what is the depiction of black people in this film, and are we locating too much character in Lincoln, the person, because of how they were treating the black people around them? I don't know, this person is
Interesting.
so great because they didn't spit on these people.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's the same thing in with gay characters, or, we include the B, but when was the last time I saw a bisexual character in a film? I don't know. Or sometimes transgendered, never asexual unless you're watching The Big Bang Theory. But, there's very few parts of that. It's mostly just gay men, and
Sure.
even then, you're marginalized.
Or you have your hot lesbians in the guy film.
Always hot
Right?
lesbians, yes, making out with each other.
And I think that's an interesting segue, because that seems how women overall are treated in movies.
Well, The Kids Are All Right. Remember that too?
Right, yeah.
That was
Oh.
that was a really big film, and it was nominated for Best Picture. I think because it was part of that political moment where people saw,
Yeah.
and of course, those brave, straight women actors who played. I mean, they were great. Certainly, they were great.
Sure.
But it's the same. I mean, it's the same. And it's not saying that it's wrong for straight characters to play. Of course, you're right. Acting is about finding essence of character, or whatever that means, and so it's not a fault, but it is, a miss at certain points too.
Yeah. I have that's one of my big pet peeves in films, is when you walk in and you have these great male roles, and the female roles are they're eye candy. They're they have nothing to say. They have no job. Their only function seems to be to stay next to the hero.
Are we talking about Transformers again?
Maybe.
No, we're talking about all of them. Yeah, no.
But all of
your
them.
point
I
is
mean,
well
it's
received.
any movie. I don't want to say any movie, because there are some very strong. Very strong sub roles. I'm thinking of. Forrest Gump. I've looked back to. What a great role for both Sally Field and
Robin Wright.
Robin Wright.
But she wasn't nominated,
True.
which is sad because she should have been.
Because that was.
She was great.
It's a great role. And
There
that's-
are some, but that's what the Academy, again, the Academy Awards come in and they show you 5 or 10 really amazing performances by
No.
women that they're just suddenly, August Osage County this year is that you have these really powerful, messed up lives that are being portrayed in such brilliant ways by these women, and they're both being nominated, and so we can pat ourselves on the back that we have suddenly these 10 women who are strong and resolute, and then we forget that the summer just happened,
Right.
and that it's about to happen again, and that we're going to see objectification run amok.
Right, and you said refuse to see The Wolf of Wall Street, that's fine. I've actually read the script, and it is so full of nudity and sex. What the movie's about? It's about sex, it's about drugs, and it's about money. That's
Yeah.
it.
And the thing is, too, is I'm sure it's brilliant. That's my problem. Is
Oh,
that,
yeah.
these films are going to be, like, from a filmic perspective, you're going to say, wow, that was just amazing. But
So I'm going to pick on The Wolf of Wall Street and American Hustle here for a second. The Wolf of Wall Street features multiple scenes where men are having sex with women. It's not women having sex with men. It is
right,
it
sure,
is
it's
that
the
way.
penetrative act. sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's one where they do it naked on a pile of money, and the actress actually had to see a medic because she had
And isn't
paper
that
cuts on
everyone's
her
fantasy?
back.
Oh,
right.
Did you really have to
Yeah,
see
it was.
I didn't know that.
In American Hustle, they were really focused on costuming and whatnot for the men, but yet the women's costumes were completely anachronistic for the females to show more body than they really would have in the time period.
Interesting.
As a columnist from Ms. Magazine puts it, she had the formal dress with a plunging neckline that looks like it should be on a nightgown, not a formal dress. So it was interesting that they, even in small ways, we see that transpire.
And it's amazing, too, that there's all these actors. Amy Adams, I think, is a really good indication of that. She's never been known as a sexual being until she started working with David O. Russell. And then if you saw The Fighter, again, those plunging
Right.
necklines, and then same thing in American Hustle. She played a nun in Doubt. That was her second Academy Award nomination, was for, wearing a habit the entire time. It's just it is very interesting how we glamorize, because we choose to glamorize sometimes by sexualizing. So it makes the 70s look better, because we can't have people wearing actual 70s clothes because it would be gross.
Right.
So we have the anachronism there to make these women look more appealing in a contemporary sense.
Sure. So, as we're starting to wrap up the show here, do you think the Academy Awards still matter to us today, or are they simply a relic of the past?
Oh, well, I'm very biased in that question, but I think that they matter because I think, one, it's our obsession with historicizing ourselves, that we want to create a moment in time where that moment is defined by all of these different concepts. And in the Western world, at least, we're obsessed with awards and giving out, and especially in the United States, we want a system of superiors and inferiors.
Sure.
And so it's very relevant because it gives it to us in a way that is very often harmless. And so a little bit of pomp and circumstance to celebrate the vision, whether or not that vision is real or completely fabricated. But today, now, it continues to I think the Academy Awards every year forces us to have a conversation about what is the state of society? What is the state of the films that we like? What is being ignored? Who is invisible to the Academy? And who is creating change? So, and what does that change mean? I think all of those questions come from an examination of the Academy Awards
Okay.
that you don't get from a lot of other award shows.
Do you think that the Academy Awards and how they select and what they select are an accurate representation of us as a society of Americans?
Oh no, for sure not. I mean, I can't. I think we privilege stories and we privilege people in ways that we wouldn't in our day-to-day lives, and so the Academy Awards exists as an exceptional example of life. So it's a fantasy for ourselves too. Like, look at us. We can walk this red carpet one day if we put our mind to it. That go-getter aspect of American idealism, rags to riches, and here are these stories that we really love. This person grew up in a farm in Minnesota, and now they're on the Academy the red carpet.
What about the films that they choose to highlight? Do you think those are an accurate representation?
Well, I like to think that the Academy thinks itself to be so, but there are a lot. I mean, I think that the production value quality has to be at a certain level
Sure.
to be considered. So there are a lot better stories that do the same thing, but then aren't put in a complete package. So I mentioned The Social Network before, but this year, Her is an examination of, again, our relationship with technology. And so it's very relevant in those conversations that we have on a daily basis. But are people able to consume that message in this particular film? I don't know. People think Spike Jonze is kind of wacky, and people might I love Spike Jonze, but a lot of people can't really digest his style.
Right.
Or, Martin Scorsese, it's so in your face. And it is a moment where we, again, are talking about greed and Wall Street and what that means. But are we glorifying it, or are we actually critiquing it? And so I think that that's a fair question. I'm not seeing it because I don't think we're critiquing it. I think we're glorifying it. There are a lot of films
I think it's a
that do
fine
that.
line. I think there's a fine line between that, and I think a lot of it depends on perception. I think I had a film professor when I was in college that we would see the same movie, and he would go on and on about how it is a degradation of black society, and I'm like, I don't know where you saw this.
Well, there's
You know,
also
it's-
two versions of it. I mean, there's the elite understanding of something. So when we say black society, what does that mean from an intellectual perspective
Sure.
to someone who is actually constructing that identity for wherever they live?
Sure.
You're negotiating different tensions, and so I mean, people like us who study it and love it, we often take on an elitist approach, and I certainly do.
Yeah.
But when I talk about formulations of identity, I mean, what does that mean to someone who's just watching Nebraska, for example? Our Midwestern identity is constructed in this very humorous way, where we're seen as kind of bumpkins. Again, the movie Fargo in 1996, same thing, construction. My family's from that part of the country, and I showed it to them, and they didn't get the joke because they all speak like that.
Right.
And then they realized that they were making fun, and so they saw it as mockery. And I have to imagine that takes place in certain aspects like that too. It's like, what is our relationship to, if a filmmaker is critiquing or examining some aspect of life, then how do the people within that life see it?
Sure.
So for a movie like Transformers, people don't ask that question because it's not anybody's life. So you can easily escape. But then the film's often like 12 Years a Slave. You can't escape anything.
Right.
There's all, so, what I guess where I'm going with this is that it's all in the eye or the lens that people take
Sure.
into the movie theater.
Okay. Excellent. So in the last couple seconds here, you have a pick for your best picture for this year?
Well, I think 12 Years a Slave is going to win.
Yeah, I know it did really well at BAFTA.
Oh, did it? I didn't see
Yeah.
the. I assumed it did. He's British, so
Yeah.
I mean, the Brits love Brits.
Right.
And Alfonso Cuarón, I assume, will win director. I'd like to think that Matthew McConaughey is not going to win. I'd like to say that Bruce Dern is going to win for Nebraska.
Oh, I love Bruce Dern.
Yeah, and I also would love Meryl Streep to win again for August, or Amy Adams, but I'm not sure how that's going to go. I think there's a free-for-all in some of the categories, which is kind of exciting this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Everyone else, why don't you watch the Oscars on March 2nd to see if any of these predictions come true, and see if you can make your own judgment on whether you think the Oscars really still matter to us today, and if they do, what you can use for them to apply to your own life to make yourself better and make our world better. Stay tuned at 8 o'clock tonight for First Cut Live. Other than that, we will see you next week. Have fun. Remember, it matters.